Good evening. My name is Paul Maurer, and I am one of Tony's brothers. And I want to start, first of all, by saying on behalf of Kathleen, Kyle, and Kelsey, Evan, and all of his brothers and sisters, that we are so very, very thankful for each of your love, and your prayers, and your support as we have walked this journey, this cancer journey with Tony, Team Tony. And we've listened to and read all of the beautiful writings of Kathleen. She's kept us up to date of all of the progress and the setbacks in Tony's battle. And we couldn't have done it without you. We are forever indebted, and we know that you will always continue to be with us. So we just want to say thank you, first of all. We are here to celebrate and honor the life of Tony Maurer. His family best knew him as Bub. He was born Anthony Elmore Maurer Jr. He was the second oldest of 9 kids and the oldest of 7 boys. He was a brother. He was a husband. He was a father. He was an uncle. He was a nephew. He was a son-in-law. He was a brother-in-law. He was a sailor. And he was a co-worker. But all of these are just titles to describe Tony. Because first and foremost, Tony was a friend. And his friendship was genuine. And it was real. It wasn't a put-on. And he cherished each friendship that he had. And he sought to make each relationship stronger. He was a teacher. He was a quiet teacher at times, but he was always finding his way to impart some wisdom or knowledge to make someone or to some situation better. Look around this church tonight. There is not a life here, a person here who hasn't been impacted in some way by Tony. We are all living with a little bit of Tony in each one of us. How many of us have had the opportunity to sit in Tony's lap? His lap was always open, young or old, toddler or teenager. Because his lap, you found comfort. You found peace. You found rest. It was a happy place. Tony has affected my life as well. And because we were brothers, I guess because brothers fight, he physically impacted me a time or two. You see, we're the closest of any of our siblings in age. We're just 4 days shy of being 11 months. And because of our large family, Tony and I actually shared a bed and a bedroom downstairs in the basement. We had this little nightly ritual. I wanted the lights on, Tony didn't. He wanted to listen to the radio, and I didn't. And so we fought. I always lost. And it happened frequently, but every night before we finished, before we would go to sleep, there was always that, I'm sorry, and we made up. We didn't want to go to bed angry with each other. Well, eventually we got separate beds and separate rooms, and things got better for me. And as we got older, Tony and I were always doing a lot of things together. We shared a paper route. We played on the same baseball teams. We hung out with the same friends. But eventually, Tony left and he went into the Navy, and I left to pursue a job in baseball. And even though the distance separated us, our relationship still stayed strong. Most of you know Tony is very good at fixing things. In fact, there's only one way to fix things. Not the right way, not the wrong way. It was Tony's way. And it was the only way. And so whenever I would have car issues when I was away or something in my house would break, I always call Tony. And he could either tell me how to fix it or send me to someone or who to call to get it fixed. And I would usually call just a couple of 100 times a month. And it got to be a point where I would call the house and Kathleen would answer the phone and she'd say, "Hi, Paul," and I'd say, "It's Tony Tony, it's your brother. And he'd answer, he said, what's broken now? But I believed I learned as much from Tony as I did from my own father. You see, Tony was my mentor. He was my big brother. He was my hero. And he was my friend. And he showed me that you don't live life by blaming others for your shortcomings. That you take the hand that you're dealt with and you deal with it. See, I would always ask Tony while he was sick, how do you feel? And I didn't want to know how he physically felt. I wanted to know how his mind was, how he was feeling. He would say, it sucks, man. But what are you going to do? You just live each day. And he truly lived each day as a blessing. When Tony found out that he had stage 4 lung cancer, and he knew that the odds were not in his favor, he embraced the decision as a challenge to be met, not as a disease to be feared. Hence the white bracelets that we all wear, with Tony saying, why not me? ESPN sports announcer Stuart Scott recently received the Jimmy B. Perseverance Award from the ESPYs. And he had this to say about his own battle with cancer. You beat cancer by how you live, and why you live, and the manner in which you live. Now, cancer may have physically taken its toll on Tony's body, but it did not win. It didn't affect his soul. It didn't affect his spirit, and it didn't affect his mind. He never lost his faith. Tony did not walk this journey alone. God was in complete control all the time. And we know where Tony is now. He is resting peacefully in the Father's arms in heaven. You see, Tony didn't just live life. His life is a legacy for others to follow. And if he could tell us anything tonight, I believe that Tony would tell us he's okay. And he's finding out the answers to all those questions that we still have. And he would tell us to live our lives and make a difference. And to affect someone else's life. And to live it with dignity and with humility and with grace. Just as Tony did. I was talking with Ed Thomas, Kathleen's brother-in-law, the other day. And we were reminiscing, saying things to Tony. And Ed was telling this story. He said, I had the opportunity to work with Tony. He described himself, I think it's his fetch it guy. Fetch it. Ed, go get this. Go fetch that. But Ed said that when Tony was sick, he would always ask him, Tony, is there something I can do for you? Is there something that you need? And Tony's answer always was, nah, I'm good. And so I wonder tonight, if we had the opportunity to ask Tony right now, hey Tony, would you like to come back and do it all over? He'd just say, nah, I'm good.
For those who don't know me, I am Sean, and I'm Tony's younger brother. I am number 7 child of 9. No, I am not the umpire. The Nard name has always been associated with many adjectives, such as loud, large, lucky, and love. Our mom and dad built this family on 2 primary principles, faith and family. I remember the day Kathleen called to tell us that Tony was diagnosed with stage 4. The family all rushed to meet at her house to be with them and pray. And I quickly realized that night, the heart is not judged by how much you love, but rather how much you are loved by others. Tony was loved. I remember asking my mom one day when she was battling her cancer, she was scared. She told me, you know, Sean, I think for every non-believer that gets cancer, God will allow the believer so that the world gets to see the difference. We've all seen the difference in how Tony chose to live his life with and without cancer. Again, the bracelets that we wear read, "Why not me?" He truly was a selfless man who put others ahead of himself. I told a story to my son one day when he mentioned that he was praying for Uncle Bubba and that he just wanted God to bring him a miracle and heal him. And I asked my son, I said, have you ever been in a game and there's 2 seconds left on the clock and the game's tied and you're at the free throw line? And you look over and you see your mom with her hands folded and praying that you make those free throws? Just look down the bleachers and you'll see another person with her hands folded praying that you miss, so that her husband who coaches the other team can keep his job. So whose miracle does God answer? Just maybe through all of this, Uncle Bubba can be someone else's miracle. Maybe he can help them be strong and keep fighting, even if the odds were against them. Kyle, Kelsey, and Kevin, you know now just how fortunate you were to have a father like that. What you may not understand is while Dad gave unselfishly his entire life, he did it for you. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he shall go, and when he is old, he will not depart far from it." You see, guys, Dad was teaching you what it looked like the whole time to be Christ. Jesus says, "Whatever you have done to the least of my brothers, you did for me." When people were thirsty, your dad gave them water. When they were hungry, he helped find a way to feed them. And when they were naked, he clothed them. When cars were broken, he fixed it for us. When homes needed to be repaired, he drove to Orlando to help. When resumes needed to be written, he spent the time to make it perfect. When decks needed to be built, he became a builder. When the relay team needed a leader, he stepped up as captain. When electrical work needed to be done, he volunteered. When homework needed to get done, he jumped in. When picking out a new home became too overwhelming, he was right there to offer his advice. And when a little girl could not fall asleep at night, he let her crawl up in his lap and would sing "Angels Among Us" until she fell asleep. It's not often in life you meet a man you can call your brother, your uncle, your friend, your dad. No matter what life threw at you, what the doctors told you, and what others believed, you persevered. When they asked if you wanted to trial a new drug, you spent days researching the benefits and the effects. You sought advice from others who experienced the families before you, and you allowed nothing to go into Tony until you guys talked. You sat up endless nights crying with him and encouraging him to keep fighting. See, Peter himself told Jesus the night before he was to be crucified, he didn't have to do it, that he would defend him. But Jesus says, "Peter, you are thinking like men think. You must see this as God does. It must be this way." I believe that every day of our lives is God ordained. And what Tony went through, we must see it the way that God does. You have experienced one of the greatest phenomenons in this life that I think anyone could ever experience. You were there when each one of your children took their first breath, and you were there and laid on Tony's chest when he took his last. What a beautiful thing for someone to share. One night in the hospital before Dad passed away, he asked me if I had seen my kids much that week. At the time, I was working a lot, spending what time I had with him. And I remember that evening, days before he passed, he sat up in the bed and he asked me to come sit next to him. He placed his hands gently on my lap and he said, "Sean Joseph, you are spending your whole life trying to make your mark on this world, when your mark the whole time are your kids at home. Go home and be with your family. Kathleen, you and Tony have made your mark with your children. It's okay to go home and be with your family." I have looked up to Tony my whole life. From the day he left to go into the Navy when I was only 9, to sitting up with him at 2 a.m. in the morning in Gatlinburg discussing my career. He always gave me sound advice. But the soundest advice he gave to me was when he said, "You stand up for your faith and you don't let anyone tell you differently. You fight for what you know is right and you respect others. You honor your family and you love your kids. And one day, you will stand before God, and hopefully you can say, I did my best." Tell me.